All right, so when it comes to the world of real estate, there can be some confusing terminology thrown around between agents, lenders, and title companies. And whether you're a first-time home buyer or a seasoned homeowner, it is important to understand these terms. So today, I want to focus on the most vital parts of both the home buying and home selling process, your closing cost. So let's start at the very beginning. What are closing costs? Closing costs are the expenses over and above the property's price that both buyers and sellers usually incur to complete a real estate transaction. All right, so what is included inside your closing costs? That's a great question. Now, while each real estate transaction is different, some of the costs associated with closing may include loan origination fees, appraisal fees, title searches, title insurance, surveys, deed recording fees, loan underwriting, real estate commission, and taxes. That's a lot. Okay, so how much are all these closing costs? Well, the total dollar amount of closing can vary by location and the value of property. But as a general rule, as the buyer, you typically pay between 2 and 6% of the purchase price as part of your closing cost. So for example, if we use the 2 to 6% closing cost rule, if you purchase a home for $200,000, your closing cost could range anywhere between $4,000 and $12,000. That's a large difference in between them, and again, this is all dependent on multiple factors. If you have any questions on exactly just how much your closing costs will be, your lender will be able to answer this and explain exactly what you're paying for as part of your closing cost. Okay, so who is responsible for paying for closing costs? In short, in most cases, buyers and sellers both pay closing costs depending on what's agreed upon as part of your contract. Now, don't forget, as a buyer, you can negotiate with the seller to help cover your closing cost. This is what real estate agents call seller concessions. Seller concessions can be extremely helpful if you think you'll have trouble coming up with the money you need to close. One important note though, there are limits on the amount that a seller can offer towards your closing cost. Generally speaking, sellers can only contribute up to a certain percentage of your mortgage value, which varies by loan type, occupancy, and your down payment. So if you are wondering just how much a seller can contribute to your closing cost, make sure you contact your lender. Okay, so how about sellers? What are their closing costs? All right, buyers, you are not the only ones who pay closing costs. As the seller, you will also need to bring a little cash to the closing table. However, this actually won't be cash out of your pocket. Instead, as the seller, more often than not, your expenses will be deducted from your profit of your home. Closing costs for sellers of real estate varies according to where you live, but as the seller, you can expect to pay anywhere from 6 to 10% of the home's sales price in closing costs at closing. So, as a seller, you too will be on the hook for certain fees and costs, including but not limited to transfer taxes, recording fees, property taxes, escrow fees, loan payoff costs, title insurance fees, and real estate agent commissions, as well as any unpaid HOA fees, liens, or judgments against your property. Okay, so can you negotiate closing costs? Simply put, yes. Yes, you can. You may wonder how you as the buyer can afford all of these fees on top of your down payment, moving expenses, and repairs to your new home. I get it, it's a lot. Fortunately, some of these closing costs may be negotiable. Here are a couple quick, easy tips for lessening your closing costs as a buyer. Number one, schedule your closing at the end of the month. I know it sounds simple, but a closing date near or at the end of the month helps cut down on prepaid daily interest charges. A lender can run this scenario for you and figure out exactly how much you could save. Number two, ask the seller for help. In some cases, you might be able to get the seller to either lower the purchase price of the home or ask the seller to cover a portion, if not all, of your closing costs. Now again, this varies in each real estate transaction. If a seller is highly motivated and their home has been on the market for quite a while and they're not receiving offers, the seller may be willing to pay your closing costs to help get the deal across the finish line. But don't forget, while this may happen in some instances, we are still in a housing market that is lacking inventory and still has high buyer demand. So in most cases, the market still favors the seller. So if you ask the seller to pay for your closing cost, you may get a little bit of pushback, but it never hurts to ask. Number three, roll your closing costs into your mortgage. Now, in my opinion, this should be your last resort. In some instances, lenders will offer to pay your closing costs or roll them into your loan. When you roll your closing costs into your loan, you're not only paying more for your mortgage, but you will also pay interest on the closing costs, which are now wrapped up inside your mortgage. So if you can avoid this option, I would. All right, so there are some lenders that will offer a mortgage with no closing costs. Sounds pretty great, right? These no-cost closing mortgages do eliminate many, but not all, of the fees for the buyer at closing. So you gotta watch out. These mortgages can be helpful in the short term if you're short on cash, but they usually come with higher interest rates. So depending on your situation, this may or may not be a good option for you long term. Okay, so when do I pay my closing cost? This is actually the easiest part. For most home loans, you'll pay your closing cost when you attend your closing. Don't forget, whether you are purchasing a new home or selling your current home, it's a team effort. Make sure you stay in contact with your real estate agent, stay in contact with your title company and your lender throughout the entire process. We are all here to help. Catch you guys next time.